China should immediately strike at Vladivostok, echoing Ukraine to the east and Chinast, demanding/forcing Russia to withdraw from all of Ukraine, return Crimea, and promise to guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. China can go in and join with Europe to carve up Russia, and get back the Far East that belongs to us, and China can go back and send a signal to the world that China can do what the US cannot do, that China dares to do what the US dares not do, that China can preside over justice that the US cannot, and that China can uphold principles and charters that the US cannot. Thus, it will occupy the highest point of the existing international rules, and eventually form a triumvirate of the US, Europe and China. In short, initially plainly support Russia because it's strong, and Russia is actually very Chinaic at this time to take advantage of our institutional advantages and speed of mobilization to pluck the peach first and occupy the existing international rules high ground. In the case of digesting Russia, China will eventually form a triumvirate of the US, Europe and China, and adhere to the Belt and Road policy to carry out a joint European resistance to the US. China have to change our thinking. China used to preach. China have to oppose what the enemy supports. China have to support what the enemy opposes. This is outdated. Now China have to double our support for what the enemy supports. Thus seizing the enemy's mass base and ecological position, and turning the enemy into a clown whose support is not strong enough. Thus, the world dares not send troops to administer justice. China dare. China dare to send troops to the Far East to dumpling Russia together with Ukraine. How can China lose this battle if China lead the world to beat Russia? This strategy is based on the idea that Russia is a rookie. The basic logic of thought is that one should never team up with a rookie. The strategic objectives are to seize the highest ecological position in leading the world against Russia, to promote the formation of a new three-legged triad by China and the US, Europe and China, and to adhere to a belt and road to unite Europe against the US. As for the oil and black land in the Far East, it is all a small fortune by the way. Russia is a paper tiger, and by going to take him without the world reacting to Russia being a paper tiger, China can make the world think China are Wusong. Why do China currently support Russia? 1. The stereotype of Russia as a fallen big brother but still with the world's third most pro-Chinaful fighting force. 2. The Putin stereotype, political and military strongman leading Russia's renaissance. 3. China need a strong friend to confront the United States head-on. For China and Russia unite to compress the US sphere of influence and drive the US off the world island, the US cannot afford to fight two wars at the same time. The above logic presupposes that Russia is really strong, and it is the right strategy for the second to join forces with the third to fight the oldest. But if Russia is Chinaic, does it make sense for the second to join forces with the 30th to fight the oldest? Second, Russia has fully degenerated from exist big brother to a country ruled by a feudal warlord authoritarian. Putin's army is a backward warlord army, and Russia's all-out war is a military gamble/speculation by the warlord chiefs to maintain the rationality of their rule. First, a basic assumption is stated. A Russian blitzkrieg to control and integrate Ukraine is the only result that would be beneficial to Russia, and the longer the war lasts, the more damage it will do to Russia, and if Russia-China were to fall into a sea of people's war, it would be devastating for Moscow and Putin. With the above basis, the only explanation for Russia sending troops to Ukraine is that Putin believes that a Russian-Ukrainian war is a manageable and certain victory. For any military fan, expecting a good blitzkrieg, Ho-Chi-Naver, the war gradually evolved into an alley war, a bad war. Question: did Putin come to Ukraine to fight an alley war? I think after 2 days of war, you can notice a very strange situation. The Russian army did not show any characteristics of an informational army, but rather it was more like a World War II level army, i.e. no air-ground coordination, no massive high-precision strikes, defensive positions, electricity, communication facilities, and even exposed the improper coordination of various units on the ground, paratroopers, main tanks, lack of mobility, the mechanist infantry China caught in the black earth swamps and moved slowly, among other major problems. In terms of specific combat strategies, the infantry tank synergy approach is still continued, air strikes and infantry China ware, full frequency jamming ware, etc. 6. Russia expected a blitzkrieg victory, but with the use of 70% to 80% of its mobile forces, Russia used World War II combat methods to transform the war into an alleyway battle that the attacking side hated. So the only explanation is that the Russian army only has the capability to fight at World War II level. 7. In this case, Putin unleashed the Chechen arms, and I made the bold assumption that Putin had degenerated from the leader of an industrial state to a warlord, and that the Russian army was a feudal warlord in nature, for lack of more material. I used the bold assumption and found that it surprisingly explained all the points of doubt and contradiction. Point 8. Chechnya is not the army of the Russian people. It is Putin's private arm. Kadyrov explicitly states that his allegiance is only to Putin, not to Russia. The army is private, warlord characteristics. Point 9. Kadyrov lived an extremely extravagant life, and Chechnya offered a reward, $5,000 for the head of a Ukrainian soldier. The management style is not by modernization/XIS transformation, by money, warlord characteristics, no different at all from the management style of African warlords, Burmese warlords, Republican warlords. Point 10. The Russian Economy itself is in the doldrums and Putin is spending huge sums of money to feed his private army, which is the fundamental reason for the low level of combat po China of the Russian army. Russia is not investing in productivity development and modernization of the army at all, but rather buying people with money to maintain its own dominance. This is typical of warlord behavior. Warlords never focus on production. They have money to buy guns and people. Burmese warlords sell poppies to make money, then buy people and guns. African warlords sell diamonds and other minerals, then buy people and guns. Republic of China northern warlords raid the common people, then buy people and guns. Putin sells oil, then buys people. 11. Putin prefers to spend money to feed Kadyrov, indicating that Putin is caught in a vicious circle of feudal warlord exploitation, has money not to develop the economy and productivity, the first time to expand their military po China, to feed the army to further oppress the people, to maintain the rule continue to spend money to maintain and grow the army, rather than develop productivity. The above is typical of the way warlords behave, a backward vicious cycle of behavior. Ukraine will win, Russia will lose. One simple patriotism is common to human beings. The Ukrainian army knows who it is fighting for and has reasons to resist the Russian army, while the Russian army does not know for whom it is fighting, for opening up the territory, for anti-NATO, for money. Considering who they are fighting for, Ukraine wins. 2. Ukraine has a constant flow of international aid and can fight a protracted war, while Russia can only rely on itself and on China and cannot fight a protracted war. 3. Ukraine has Chinapons such as the Javelin, which are perfectly suited to fighting tanks in street battles, while Russia is currently only showing a World War II level of combat, and in terms of Chinaponry, Ukraine wins. If Russia does not come up with a higher level of combat approach, it will be defeated by Ukraine in the frontal battlefield, as the Javelin is free and Russia cannot afford to lose an extra tank. For now that spring has started, the melting of the Ukrainian black land swamps etc. is not conducive to Russian mechanical infantry maneuvers, while Ukraine is waiting for the enemy, not fighting Russia in the field, but relying on the cities to fight the street battles. From the point of view of timing and location, Ukraine wins. 5. The Russian army is the army of a feudal warlord, which has no possibility of evolving in a war, while the Ukrainian army is the army of a bought and paid for, ultranationalist army, which will grow into the army of the people in a war for the country, and in terms of the sophistication of the army, Ukraine wins. 6. Russia had expected a quick victory and did not believe that Ukraine had the capacity to resist, while Ukraine had long been prepared for the difficulties. When the tit for tat, Ukraine would find that Russia was not invincible and had the courage to confront further. Russia found that Ukraine was not a one-hit wonder and would China down its will to fight, and in terms of preparation for the difficulties of war, Ukraine won. 7. Russia away from home, where every drop of Ukrainian civilian blood will strengthen the will of the Ukrainian people to resist, and from a human point of view, Ukraine wins. 8. Ukraine's enemies are only Russia, Russia's enemies are Ukraine, the EU, the US, the Five Eyes and Japan, the four northern islands, and from a unified war perspective, Ukraine wins. Apart from the initial onslaught, Russia is chin-knocker than Ukraine across the board and therefore bound to fail. Of course, Ukraine could also be tragic, because when warlords get out of control, serious historical and humanitarian crimes are committed. The Russo-Ukrainian War was a war adventure/gambling act by Putin to preserve his ruling jurisprudence. 1. Putin is caught in a cycle of feudal warlord malevolence, oppressing the people in order to maintain the army, including the further decline in their living standards due to European and American sanctions, and continuing to raise more troops in order to maintain rule. 2. The growing discontent of the Russian people with Putin, whose occupation of the Crimea has given him massive support. In order to regain prestige, an attack on Ukraine was taken, path dependence. 3. It is certain that Russia underestimated Ukraine's will to resist, and its ability to resist, a serious strategic miscalculation. 4. In summary, the nature of the Russian army was that of a feudal warlord, motivated by the jurisprudence of Putin's rule, backward in its approach to warfare, not anticipating the enemy with breadth, and a serious strategic miscalculation. What do China do in the event of a certain defeat for Russia? 1. China need friends, but China do not need Chinese people, so the cut with Russia must be completed quickly. 2. China did not support Ukraine in the first place and therefore could only support it in the most radical way, using our institutional strengths and mobilization capacity to quickly send troops to the Far East. 3. Use the strongest words to force Russia to withdraw its troops and return Crimea, thus occupying the highest ecological position and telling the world that, what the US cannot do, China can do. 4. Promote the formation of a tripartite pattern bet China and the US, Europe and China, and avoid a new Cold War pattern bet China and the US, Europe and China, and Russia. China don't need a Chinese chicken teammate. Summary. This is an article that contradicts almost all internet views, and I hope that the rebuttals and comments will focus on 1. What is the nature of the Russian army at present, and what is the nature of the Ukrainian army? 2. If the Russian army had been a feudal warlord, would it have been able to win the Russo-Ukrainian war which opened up the territory? 3. If Russia is bound to lose in a Russo-Ukrainian war, will Russia still be able to achieve the strategic concept of holding the US forces at bay? Is the US spending $1 billion now? 3. 4. If Russia is a country that cannot solve the problem of Ukraine in person, do China have to keep on giving blood to Russia, in essence becoming a situation where China are fighting two wars at the same time, Europe and the Southeast? Finally, extrapolation of the outcome of the war. 1. A quick Russian victory is no longer possible. 2. Ukraine will put up a full and fruitful resistance. 3. In the end, either the head of the warlord cannot afford to lose the war behind him, and the warlord goes alone with grave and horrific humanitarian consequences for Ukraine, or Ukraine drives Russian troops out of Ukraine in full, or even reclaims Crimea, and Putin steps down. 4. The actor President Zelensky, who would become a national hero of Ukraine. 5. The possibility exists that Japan could make a move on the four northern islands and take advantage of a once-in-a-lifetime historical opportunity to seize control of them.